Welcome to Hair 101, a podcast where you'll learn all you need to know about hair, color, science, and of course, the importance of the client experience. Whether you're an experienced stylist, just starting out, or have a curious mind and want to know more about your hair, this podcast is for you. I'm Nicole Manzer, salon owner, master stylist, and your host. I'm so grateful to share 20 years of my most valuable and timeless insights with you. Here we go. Hello and welcome to Hair 101 with myself, Nicole Manzer. Today we're going to be getting into how hair color works. So I find this really interesting topic because a lot of people don't really understand how the hair color works, especially clients, and I really like to educate my clients to the best of my ability so that when they have more of the education themselves, they can make the right decisions, and it's not just me making the decision, it's us having a discussion and making a decision together. So getting right into how hair color works, knowledge of the hair color's composition, categories, and bases will provide you with the confidence and options. The following three components are essential to creating permanent hair color. They are ammonia, hydrogen peroxide, and intermediate dyes. You can also have a direct dye and peroxidized dyes as well. So let's go into ammonia. So ammonia for hair color has a pH of 10. If we know that the hair's pH naturally is between a 4.5 to a 5.5, and that the hair to become permanent actually needs to get up to over a 9 in order for the hair color to become permanent on the hair, it makes sense that ammonia is a pH of 10. Now, they can range from a 9 to 11 depending on the company, but the product that I'm using is a 10, so I just keep that in the back of my mind. So what does ammonia do? Ammonia swells the hair shaft, it raises the pH, it opens the cuticle, and allows the penetration of the hair color molecules. The higher the ammonia, the higher the lifting ability. So ammonia is also a large volatile gas. It's gotten a really, really bad rap over the past few years, and they've come up with other products that are MEAs or AMPs that don't smell. But essentially ammonia is a gas, and the AMEs and the MEAs are liquids. Ammonia is the easiest product that you can use out of the three to color the hair. It goes in there, it does its job, and it leaves. Essentially, the gas evaporates from your hair. Yes, it might have a bad smell to it, but it is not as damaging as an MEA or an AMP can be in the hair. So an MEE, and I'm not going to get into the really long, complicated words that those two are, but an MEE and an AMP, because they're liquids, they actually sit in the hair longer, and they like to eat, you guessed it, the amino acids in the hair. And so this can actually damage the hair, and in order to remove them, you need ammonia to remove these things from the hair. So you're still using ammonia anyway, so why not just use it the first time? And, unfortunately, we can't do anything about the smell yet. Who knows what some of these amazing color companies are coming on to, and I think in a way that they are progressing. But right now, in my opinion, ammonia is the best thing to do for the hair. It goes in there, it does its job, and it gets out, and it's effective. And it doesn't damage the hair any more than it needs to. So the next thing we have is hydrogen peroxide. So the pH of hydrogen peroxide is 3.5 to 3.8. So now we're using ammonia, which has a really high pH, and hydrogen peroxide, which has a really low pH. And so we're creating a bit of a chemical reaction within the hair. So what hydrogen peroxide does is that it supplies the oxygen energy needed to fuel the oxidization process. The oxidization process in the hair performs two tasks. It decolorizes the melanin granules, the natural pigment in the cortex, and it develops the artificial pigment to produce a new hair color. So I like to think of this as it's my gasoline. It goes in there, it removes the pigments, the natural pigments from the hair. And then as it's doing that, it's also blowing up the other pigments, the intermittent dyes or the artificial pigments that we're putting in the hair. So it's blowing those up and it's allowing things to kind of process and work the way they're supposed to. Now, when we're looking in our storage cupboard, we usually have a choice about 4 or 5 different volumes of peroxide. So really to get an understanding of what those volumes are, you'll usually see, say, 10 volume and then beside it 3%, or 20 volume and beside it 6%. What those percentages mean is that 6% of the bottle has the peroxide, hydrogen peroxide in it. So the other 94% of that bottle is actually water, softeners, other things to kind of help the hair color process along, but only 6% is hydrogen peroxide. Now, this is really important to kind of note because when you're going up to 40 volume, which is 12%, it bites. It really hurts when you put it on your skin. Now, I don't know about you, but I would not want to have something stronger than 40 volume hit my skin. If we're going up to 60 volume, which potentially is 18% hydrogen peroxide, you're almost going to remove skin there. So you need to be very, very careful when you're doing that. Now, a lot of hair schools and companies teach that 1 level of volume gives us 1 lift. So just to reiterate that, 10 volume is typically used to deposit only. Or if the hair is really, really fine, you may get a slight level of lift. 20 volume typically lifts 1 to 2 levels. But typically 20 volume is what we're going to need in order to get that gray coverage and the longevity. 30 volume lifts about 2 to 3 levels, and 40 volume lifts about 3 to 4 levels, depending on the hair. Now, if you need to go past that 3-4 levels of lift, in my opinion, you need to use a bleach, because putting 50 volume on somebody's scalp or 60 volume on somebody's scalp is just cruel. Bleach is not fun either, but at least you can go low and slow. You could use a 10 volume with a bit of bleach, and that's going to be a lot nicer on somebody's scalp than using 50 volume with a high ammonia content. Ouch, I can't even imagine. So then we have our dyes, and there are a few different types of dyes that different companies use, but typically intermediate dyes are the dyes that you're going to find in permanent hair color. So they're an oxidative dyes used to produce permanent hair color. They go into the cortex when mixed with H2O2, which is hydrogen peroxide, like a deflated balloon. So they're a deflated balloon. We mix the hydrogen peroxide with the dyes. The ammonia opens up the hair cuticle. The hydrogen peroxide and the dye are kind of mixing together. They go into the hair cortex, and then they start inflating and changing the natural pigment to whatever desired color we have chosen. The next type of dye that we have is called a direct dye or pre-oxidized dye. So these dyes tend to sit on the cuticle. They're bigger. There's more reflection in there, and they're staining, and they're like a pre-inflated balloon. So essentially, having a direct dye or pre-oxidized dye, you don't necessarily need the hydrogen peroxide because it's already inflated. It already has, it's a bigger molecule, which is why it sits on the cuticle, because it's not small enough to actually go into the cortex of the hair itself. But it can be very staining, so we can stain the cuticle of the hair to whatever colors we want. So if you have, let's just say, a really beautiful, vibrant red color, and then about 2 weeks later, after a few shampoos, that red color starts to kind of fade away a little bit, Typically, that is the direct or the pre-oxidized dyes that have kind of stayed away. Now, it's also going to stain the hair. So if we decided the next time that she's in that we wanted to bring her to a platinum blonde, now we're having to actually fight through the direct and the pre-oxidized dyes that we've put on the hair because they've stained the cuticle. So that's where the complication lies. So really, what does oxidization mean? So we're modifying the sulfur bonds in the hair and diffusing the melanin. We're adding oxygen to the product itself, and so it's starting to work. It's starting to move, which is modifying the sulfur bonds. And then how can you tell the difference if a product has a direct dye or an intermediate dye? And can they be mixed together? So when you're looking at a tube of color and you kind of push it from the bottom and it has like a creamy consistent, it doesn't have, even though it could be a violet or a red, but it doesn't have the look coming out of the tube, that tells you it's an intermediate dye. When you're pushing it out of the tube and it is bright red, bright orange, bright yellow, that is a direct or pre-oxidized dye. And yes, they can be mixed together as long as you adhere to whichever color company lines that you are using. So for example, you're not going to mix together a semi-permanent color with a permanent color because then you're playing with the pH too much. Those two colors are not meant to go together. But essentially having intensifiers or color additives, which is just a pure red pigment, pure orange pigment, violet, those are 9 times out of 10, those are direct dyes or the pre-oxidized dyes that you can put into the hair, and they will help color the hair or give you that intensity that you are looking for. So just to kind of recap everything we spoke about here, the hair color has 3 different parts to it, which is ammonia, hydrogen peroxide, and a dye. So those dyes are broken up into 2 different types of dyes, the intermediate dye and the direct dye. And together, those 3 components, and sometimes 4, make permanent hair color, which the ammonia goes in, it lifts the cuticle, the hydrogen peroxide mixed with the dye is going into the cortex of the hair. We're kind of Pac-Manning away all the natural melanin. We're putting in our artificial pigment. They do its job. The ammonia gets out of the hair. The cuticle closes back up. We give the hair a good shampoo after the processing time is done. And that is it. The hair is now permanently colored. So I hope you've learned something new today. I love talking about color and the science of hair. So if there's anything that I've missed, or if you have an opinion of what I've said here, please feel free to comment below or contact me on Instagram. And I would love to have a discussion with you about hair color. Thanks so much for taking the time to learn something new today. I hope you apply this knowledge and keep developing your craft. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell your friends and colleagues about us to help us grow and spread the knowledge. You can also leave us a great review. Get in touch with me at nicole.manzer on Instagram with any topic, suggestions. I'd love to hear your classic industry insights and share them on future episodes. So please contact me with your tips to make sure you include your name, where you're writing from, and remember, I'm here for you. All the links you need are in the show notes below. Subscribe on your favorite podcast listening app and tune in next time. Let your inner beauty shine.